When you think of Glasgow, you probably think of a city that is largely Victorian, at least architecturally speaking. It doesn't have the medieval charm of Edinburgh's Old Town or the Georgian character of Edinburgh's New Town. And yet, behind the camera in Carlton Place is one of very few surviving Georgian streets in the whole city. A little bit of old Glasgow that has almost been forgotten. And behind one of those doors is, without question, one of the finest Georgian interiors in the whole country.
Carlton Place was built in the early 19th century, in the Georgian era, in stages between 1804 and 1818. The architect was Peter Nicholson, an architect who designed many of Glasgow's famous buildings, like Hutchison's Hall, the Nelson's Monument in Glasgow Green, the Royal Exchange, much altered these days and now the Gallery of Modern Art, as well as Gorbals Parish Church. This was at one time part of the Gorbals, but land was sold off to a Mr. John Laurie, who planned to create an upmarket area for the city's wealthy merchants, of which there were many. Certainly, when you look at census returns, there was a pretty affluent bunch of folk living here, with the occupation of the head of the house ranging from being a merchant, a surgeon, a writer, banker, fancy dress maker, shipbroker, teacher and steamboat owner. Definitely not working class. The new district was named Lauriston, and padlocked gates were to be erected at either end of Carlton Place to deter access by riffraff. This might well have been one of the first gated communities in the country, about 200 years before its time. In the centre of each of the two terraces at either side of Portland Street was a house much grander than those at either side. Each had a portico, one curving and one rectangular, both with supporting stone columns. These properties were so grand that the internal decorated plasterwork in at least one is thought to have been carried out by Italian Francisco Bernasconi, who was also responsible for the internal decoration within Windsor Castle. In essence, what you had here in at least one of the houses was an interior that would rival any royal palace or castle. If we look at old maps, you can see the progression of the area from vacant land by a washing green to just another area of growth on the south of the River Clyde. In this 1778 map, you can see the washing green by the river, and nothing really in the way of buildings on what was to become Carlton Place. In this 1807 map, Carlton Place has appeared, but the general area has yet to be fully built on and developed, as we can see in this later town plan of 1857. The problem with Carlton Place and Laurie's big ideas is that things just didn't quite go to plan. The padlocked gates failed to keep the riffraff out, and the area was pretty close to the East End and a whole load of industries with big chimneys and smells. It was never going to be an upmarket street, never in a million years. Over time, the grand big houses were divided up, and what started out as 20-something addresses became close to 100. Gradually, the middle classes moved out, and business moved in, so turning a residential street into office space and factories. At numbers 56 to 61, for example, you once had a cork-cutting business. Over time there has been a paint store, a horse collar maker, basket factory, the Scottish Football Association, decorators and banks, and in what was probably the grandest house in the whole street, Lauriston House, Glasgow Corporation's Public Assistant Department. Today, some properties are still occupied by business, solicitors and property firms mainly, but much of the street has an air of abandonment about it, with boarded-up windows, overflowing gutters leading to unsightly stone staining, and plant growth on stone facades. In short, one of the finest Georgian terraces in Glasgow is falling apart at the seams.
Am I okay to pass, or is it just...
On you go, yeah.
Okay.
And behind one of the front doors, the door of Lauriston House, the stunning decorated plasterwork by the finest Italian artist is showing signs of damage and in danger of being lost forever. Whatever restoration work may have been going on would appear to have ground to a halt.
In 2019, Historic Environment Scotland took a series of photographs inside this building. This is Lauriston House in Carlton Place, once the home of John Laurie and his brother David. And it was John who had the idea of transforming this area into a real kind of upmarket street in the city. Today, restoration of the building is in progress, but it is a long process. I think it's been going on for a number of years now. It's probably come to a halt at various stages, and time doesn't really serve these old buildings well when they're lying unoccupied. Things can only deteriorate, and the building's future is uncertain. As one of the very last Georgian townhouses in the city, one of the very few remaining merchants' houses in the city that's laying practically unaltered. It has the potential to be a major visitor attraction for the city of Glasgow.